There are dozens of videos on YouTube listing out reasons why shrimp might be dying, but none of them really get to the root cause of why your shrimp might be dying. Over the years, I've lost more than my fair share of shrimp, and this video is based on my experiences of working out why my shrimp were dying. In this video, I share with you my 7 check zones, which will help you work out why your shrimp are dying and suggest ways you can prevent further losses. This isn't just another top 10 reasons why video. This video could actually prevent your shrimp from dying. Stick around, because later in the video, I will explain how you can download a copy of this checklist for free. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Richard, and I'm the author of the Neocaridina Shrimp Handbook. So I've broken this checklist down into 7 separate sections, and each section has a number of checks you can do to try and work out why your shrimp might be dying. Now what I've done is I've ordered this list in more or less the most likely reason your shrimp are dying through to some slightly more obscure reasons. So when I give you the first few and you go, Rich, we've heard that one, stick with me. They are first on the list because they're actually the most likely reason your shrimp are dying. And if you've checked those off, if you aren't struggling with those, maybe it's one of these that is killing your shrimp. So I'm sure you've heard me say on many occasions before, shrimp are incredibly hardy, but they do need their water parameters to be within certain tolerances. And there are essentially 7 major water parameters that we need to check. And they are the ammonia, nitrite and nitrate levels, the pH, the carbonate hardness and the general hardness, and the water temperature. Let's look at the first 3 in detail: ammonia, nitrite and nitrate. These are essentially often referred to as the nitrogen cycle. And when our fish or shrimp go to the bathroom, or if there's any uneaten food left in the aquarium that starts to break down, that gives off ammonia. And ammonia is pretty much toxic to all aquatic life. It's essential that the ammonia levels in our tank are kept at 0 parts per million. Now, the easiest way to test these water parameters is either using test strips like these ones from Escher that are available here in Europe, or you can use a liquid test kit like the API Master Test Kit. It doesn't really matter what you use to measure these water parameters as long as they're reasonably accurate. Now, as I say, probably the most likely reason your shrimp are dying is because you have elevated ammonia. If your test kit shows anything above 0 ppm, 0 parts per million of ammonia, that's the most likely reason that your shrimp are dying. And you need to carry out an urgent water change by probably 25 or 50% to reduce the amount of ammonia in the aquarium. And the same is true if you measure and you have a reading of nitrite. Nitrite is not as toxic to fish and shrimp as ammonia, but it will still kill them pretty quickly. Now, the third parameter in that trio was the nitrate level. And I'm going to say something now which no doubt will bring me some hate in the comments. And that is, I don't tend to worry about nitrate, even when it gets as high as 100 ppm, 150 parts per million. There have been plenty of studies that show that fish and shrimp can easily handle nitrates 100, 150, no problem whatsoever. To be fair, where I live here in the UK, the water comes out of my taps at up to 50 ppm of nitrates. I personally don't worry about nitrates as long as they're under about 100 parts per million. And I'm not even convinced if they're at 150, they pose much of a problem to our fish and shrimp. But if you are losing your shrimp and you've carried out a test and it's higher than you would like, then perhaps consider carrying out a water change. Personally, I never worry about the nitrate levels. Now, water parameter number 4 was the pH, or the measure of how acidic or alkaline the water is. Now, our cherry shrimp are incredibly tolerant. They'll be quite happy with a pH from 6.5 to 8, and they could probably go slightly either way. But what they need is for that pH to be more or less stable. So if you know that your tank is 7.2 and you test it and for some reason it's now 6.8, it's suddenly changed, maybe it's gone up or it's gone down, then that change could be the reason that your shrimp are dying. So the pH itself doesn't matter too much. What matters is what pH have your shrimp been used to and what is the pH now, which is one of the reasons you might want to check your pH on perhaps a monthly basis. So you have a baseline and you can see if there's been a change. If your shrimp are suddenly dying and you notice your pH has shot up or shot down, you need to find out why and address it, perhaps by carrying out a water change. Now, parameters 5 and 6 were the GH, or general hardness, and the KH, or carbonate hardness. And again, our shrimp are incredibly tolerant, but they do like a GH to be in the region of 6 to 10 degrees of general hardness, and the KH, or carbonate hardness, to be in the range of 4 to 8 degrees of carbonate hardness. And again, if you notice over time that your GH or your KH has changed, that could be the reason your shrimp are dying. Again, they're incredibly tolerant, but they want stability. They want the KH, the GH to remain more or less stable. If you're testing monthly and you build up a picture of the KH and the GH over the month and it suddenly drops, that could be the reason your shrimp are dying. Now, the seventh and final parameter that could be the reason your shrimp are dying is water temperature. Shrimp can live anywhere from the mid-50s, probably up to the low 80s. They'll be quite happy. Where they'll struggle is if your water temperature is 65 in the morning, but the sun streams in through the window and it shoots up to 80 during the day. And then at night, when the sun's gone down, it drops back down again. That kind of fluctuation is going to kill your shrimp. If your shrimp tank is located next to a heater or a radiator in your room, and when the heating comes on, the temperature rises rapidly, and when the heating goes off, it drops again. That could be the reason your shrimp are dying. Your shrimp won't be dying because you're keeping them at 65. They could be dying because you keep them at 65, but the temperature rockets and drops and rockets and drops. Shrimp love stability. So take some time to monitor your temperature and see, is it fluctuating, potentially killing your shrimp, or is it nice and stable, in which case your shrimp won't really care, they'll be happy. So with section number 1 done, if none of those are the reason your shrimp are dying, let's look at section number 2, which is all about your tank setup. Now, I've broken section number 2 into 5 separate checks. And the first of these is, how long has your tank been set up and running? If you've only recently set up your tank and you put your shrimp in after a few days, or even worse, on the day you set it up, that could be the reason your shrimp are dying. Now, I'm not talking about your aquarium being cycled. I'm not talking about your filter being cycled and able to handle the waste from the shrimp. I'm talking about your aquarium being seasoned. I'm talking about there being sufficient biofilm, sufficient microscopic life, sufficient starts of algae for the shrimp to dine on. Shrimp spend all day, every day, eating away, eating biofilm, pecking at algae. All of these things that don't exist until your tank has had time. If your tank is newly set up and your shrimp are dying, that is unfortunately probably the reason why. But let's say your tank isn't freshly set up, but your shrimp are dying. Are you carrying out unnecessary water changes? I'm on a campaign at the moment to get people away from changing water out of habit and get them onto just changing water when they need to. I've said it so many times, shrimp love stability. If I'm draining this tank down by 25, 50% once a week, filling it back up with fresh water, draining it down the next week, filling it back up, I'm affecting the temperature, probably the pH, probably the KH and the GH. None of these things are going to be good for my shrimp. There won't be stability there. I'm a firm believer now that we should only be carrying out water changes when we need to, and we should get away from unnecessary water changes. And if you are changing water every week, every 2 weeks, out of habit, then that disruption could be what's killing your shrimp. Now, potential reason number 3 is, are you doing those water changes or topping up your tank, but not using a suitable dechlorinator? I'm astonished how many people I talk to, and they'll say, my shrimp died. Okay, go through, talk me through what's happened, talk me through the process. They filled their aquarium up with tap water and they've not bothered to use dechlorinator. If you have chlorine in your tap water, or like me, even worse, you have chloramine in your tap water, then it's essential you use a good quality dechlorinator to break down that chlorine, to break down that chloramine and make it safe for your shrimp. Chlorine, given time, will gas off. Chloramine doesn't gas off. If you have chloramine in your water and you don't use a dechlorinator, you will be killing your shrimp. Okay, so onwards and upwards looking at the tank setup. If it's none of those things, are you using a canister filter or a hang-on back filter without an intake sponge? In this tank here, you can see I run a small hang-on back filter. If I didn't use an intake sponge over the intake of that filter, any baby shrimp I get would get sucked up into the impeller, stuck in the media, no more. In my opinion, every single shrimp tank running a hang-on back filter or a canister filter should have a sponge over the intake. Those filters come with strainers, which are great for keeping out fish, but they do absolutely nothing for keeping out shrimp. If you're running one of those filters and you sit looking at your tank, it won't be long before one of your little shrimp got into that filter and there'll be nothing you can do. And that could be the reason that your shrimp are dying. Maybe it's none of those reasons. Maybe you're running a shrimp tank without a filter, in which case the filter can't be killing your shrimp. It can't be sucking your shrimp up. But if you're running a filterless shrimp tank, are you running an air stone? In my opinion, an air stone is absolutely crucial in a filterless aquarium. I'm in the process of building a couple of natural aquariums here that aren't going to run on filters, but I'm still going to put air stones in there. The air stones mean you get proper circulation, so you don't end up with dead spots where there's low oxygen or different temperatures in the tank. But they also create surface movement, and surface movement allows dissolved carbon dioxide in the water to gas off to the air above, and oxygen in the air above to be drawn into the water. And our fish and shrimp need oxygen to survive. So if your shrimp are dying and your tank's not newly set up and you're not doing water changes and they're not getting sucked up the filter, are you running an air stone? Now, before we move on to the next section in the checklist, I'm on a mission this year to release 1 or 2 shrimp keeping videos every single week. So if you want to up your shrimp keeping game and you think you might enjoy 1 or 2 shrimp keeping videos every single week, then why not subscribe to the channel? Now, section number 3 is all about feeding and nutrition. So your shrimp are not dying because of the water parameters, and you don't think they're dying because your tank is newly set up or you're doing unnecessary water changes. Could your shrimp be dying because they're not getting a varied enough diet? Yes, our shrimp are essentially scavengers, but in the wild, they would have the most varied diet you can imagine. They would eat dead fish and other dead shrimp, dead bugs, leaves that were breaking down, algae, seeds, fruits that had fallen in the water. Their diet would be phenomenally varied. But what we tend to do in the hobby is we go, I'll chuck in half an algae wafer, and next week, I'll chuck in another half. Or worse than that, we say, well, they're scavengers. They'll get by eating whatever the fish don't eat. If you're not target feeding your shrimp and your shrimp are dying, you may well be starving your colony and you need to target feed them. If you keep your shrimp with fish, like up here, where I've got a cull tank, which is in with my guppies, those guppies are voracious feeders. I have to make sure enough food gets to the bottom so the shrimp can eat it. But maybe you are feeding your shrimp, but as I say, you are Mr. Algae Wafer, and that's all you put in week after week after week, and you're not giving your shrimp enough variety. I give my shrimp incredible variety. They eat flake food, sinking pellets, vibrobites, frozen bloodworm, frozen daphnia, frozen brine shrimp. They eat rapashi. I give them stinging nettles. I give them dandelion leaves. I occasionally put in small pieces of vegetables for them. I give them as much variety as possible. And in my opinion, if you want your shrimp colony to grow, if you want to have lots of babies, if you want your shrimp to be colourful and bright, they need variety. If you're throwing in half an algae wafer a week, that could be the reason your shrimp are dying. And my third reason in this section that your shrimp could be dying is because there's not enough surface area for biofilm. Yes, we have to feed our shrimp. Yes, that food should have variety, but they really want to spend the majority of their day consuming biofilm, consuming microscopic life, microscopic bacteria that live on all the surfaces in our aquariums. And if you're keeping your shrimp in a bare bottom tank with 2 rocks, there isn't much surface area for biofilm and bacteria to form on. In my opinion, every single shrimp tank should have a good substrate. Substrates have a wondrous array of surface area. Every tank should have pieces of wood or rocks to give as much surface area as possible. And they should have live aquarium plants. Live aquarium plants provide the absolutely perfect surface for biofilm to develop on. We could even be as bold as to allow a bit of algae to develop, and our shrimp will absolutely love that. So you might find your tank has been set up for a while and your parameters are fine and you're not changing water and you do feed your shrimp, but there's not enough surface area for biofilm to develop on. And that might be why your shrimp are dying. Now, as I've said, this list is ordered in the most likely reasons to perhaps some of the least likely reasons. And section 4 is all about tankmates and predators. So my first question to you is, could something be eating your shrimp? If you keep your shrimp in with tankmates and you're not necessarily seeing dead bodies, but you're thinking, well, I don't seem to have many shrimp left, or I haven't seen any shrimp in a few days, then my first question is, could something be eating your shrimp? I don't keep any shrimp in with my gold dust mollies. I don't keep any in with the crepenses. Do you know why? Because they would eat the shrimp. But even if you're keeping something as small as a neon tetra, as a glow light tetra, to a baby shrimp, a neon tetra is a hardcore predator. Again, I've spoken to people in the past. They'll say, Rich, I don't know why my shrimp are dying. I never see the babies. I don't know. They're not breeding. What's going on? And when I talk to them, they've got a wonderful shrimp tank, but they've also got 20 neon tetras, or they've got some dwarf gouramis. And whilst shrimp can live with these guys, whilst shrimp can live with fish tank mates, you do have to understand that you will get fewer babies. And over time, if you don't have sufficient hiding places, over time, that colony may well dwindle down to the point where you go, I never see any shrimp. Where have all my shrimp gone? Why are my shrimp dying? And they could be dying because a tankmate is eating them. One way you could try and work out if this is a problem is, do you ever see dead bodies? Do you ever look into your tank and go, you see the shrimp on its back laying there dead and you think, my shrimp's died. Well, if that's the case, it probably wasn't a predator. A predator typically will eat the shrimp and be done with it. If you're seeing dead bodies on the substrate, then it's probably not because of a predator. If you do want to keep fish in with your shrimp, but you want your shrimp colony to thrive, give them as many hiding places as possible. In the cull tank up here, there's a thick bunch of crypts, and that is absolutely teeming with shrimp. Could the guppies go in and eat them? Yeah, probably. Do they? Not that often, because guppies are lazy. I stick food in the feeding hole, the guppies are up at that the whole time. They rarely go in there. So if you want to keep shrimp in with fish, give them plenty of hiding places. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, this checklist is available as a free download. And if you would like to download it, just put in the comments below, give me the checklist, and I'll send it to you. So section number 5 is all about breeding and breeding issues. Let's assume none of what we've discussed so far are the reasons your shrimp are dying. The first question you need to ask yourself is my colony dwindling over time? Now, if you look into your shrimp tank and the substrate is covered in dead bodies, then your colony is not having breeding issues. They're not dying because the colony is dwindling over time. But if you've had your colony for some time and it's never really started to grow, and in fact, it's starting to dwindle, then that could be because they're not breeding. And one of the reasons could be if you were unlucky like me. A year or two ago, I bought a colony of 10 orange really shrimp, and they were superb. I love them. They popped against the plants. They were amazing, but they were all female. And an all female colony does not grow over time. So what happened is, as those shrimp began to age, I didn't get any babies. I would lose one, down to 9. Lost one, 8, 7, 6. The colony was never going to grow. So if you have a small quantity of shrimp, could they all be male? Could they all be female? So that would be one reason why your colony is not growing. Your shrimp are essentially dying because they can't repopulate. Or could it be that they're not breeding because the temperature is too low? Whilst the shrimp they'll be quite happy living in the low 60s, won't bother them at all, they won't necessarily breed at that temperature. They may well be waiting for the temperature to rise, so they feel it's a more suitable time to breed. And because they're not breeding, because the temperature is so low, your shrimp colony is dying over time. It's slowly dwindling down. And a third reason your shrimp could be dying due to breeding issues is, are you providing sufficient hiding places for any babies that are born? When our female shrimp is ready and the eggs are fully developed, she gives them a sharp kick and the babies come out. But those babies perhaps don't move for 1, 2, or 3 weeks. And if your tank lacks suitable hiding places for those babies, then maybe one of the fish in the tank is coming along and sniping them, or maybe there just isn't really anywhere for them to go and they end up starving out before they grow. In my experience, an absolutely essential part of any shrimp breeding tank is Java moss. When my wife and I used to breed shrimp commercially, we had tubs that were basically more Java moss than they were water. It was absolutely crammed full of Java moss, and those tubs produce thousands and thousands of babies every single month. So you need to consider, could your shrimp colony be dying because it isn't reproducing quickly enough because you don't have ample hiding places for the babies? Now, as we move on to section number 6, anyone who's still with us at this point, this is proper hardcore. If your shrimp haven't died because of parameters, and it wasn't because you got a newly set up tank, and you're feeding them beautifully and there's plenty of hiding spaces, and you think they're breeding fine, but they're still dying, could it be because you are using a medication or a fertilizer that isn't shrimp safe? Now, I'm not necessarily talking about a fertilizer that has copper in it, because small doses of copper, your plants need small doses of copper, but your shrimp actually require or can tolerate small doses of copper. In my tanks, I use Tropica Premium Nutrition, and I'm absolutely certain if you check the ingredients, that will include copper, but it's okay because it's at a level that is safe for shrimp. But if you have a fertilizer that you're squirting in, which for some reason isn't shrimp safe, or you're using a medication on your fish that isn't shrimp safe, could that be the reason your shrimp are dying? Now, maybe you're not using fertilizers, you haven't added medications that could be killing your shrimp. Maybe you've done what I've done in the past, which is introduce a toxin from my hands. I, stupidly, did a breeding challenge on the internet. I got myself 20 yellow shrimp and I said, how many shrimp can I breed in 100 days? and that colony went off like a rocket. And then I'm 99% certain I did some maintenance in that tank without checking my hands were clean. I normally like to run my hands under the warm tap for a minute or so, just without any soap, just to make sure my hands are clean. I think I introduced a toxin to that tank that ultimately killed off most of that colony. So if your shrimp are dying and it isn't for any of the other reasons, could it be that you've introduced a toxin from your hands into the water? And if you haven't introduced a toxin from your hands, could something airborne have got in your tank? Has somebody in your house or somebody near your house been using an airborne pesticide, a fly spray, a roach spray, something that could enter your water and kill your shrimp? Because it will. In my experience, fly spray, wasp spray, insect spray, whatever it might be, if that gets into your shrimp tank, that could very well be the reason your shrimp are dying. If you think that is the case, then the first thing I would do is carry out a decent water change. And the second thing I would do is add some carbon to my filter. Carbon will pull toxins, it will pull things out of the water that would otherwise harm your shrimp. So if you think you could have introduced a toxin on your fingers or something airborne could have got into the water, carry out a water change, add some carbon to your filter, and keep an eye on your shrimp. Now, section number 7 is for everybody that can rule out everything we've spoken about before. If you know it is none of those things, you've checked everything, you never put a toxin in there, you don't squirt anything that could have killed your shrimp, and you've not been using pesticides, then could it be down to your shrimp genetics? Could your shrimp just be poor quality shrimp? One of the best things about shrimp is anybody can breed them. One of the worst things about shrimp is anybody can breed them. Anybody with a small fish tank and a dozen cherry shrimp can set up as a breeder. They can bash out any old rubbish, sell them for $3, $4, $5 a shrimp, whatever it might be, and you get them home and they don't last long. The trouble is, there's almost no way to know if your shrimp are dying because of poor genetics. All you can do on this one is ensure that any shrimp you do buy, you buy from a reputable source. Buy them from a good local fish store. Buy them from a breeder that has perhaps lots of reviews online or another hobbyist has recommended to you. If your shrimp are dying because of bad genetics, there's pretty much nothing you can do. Now, in my opinion, one of the main reasons shrimp die is due to unnecessary water changes. In fact, I believe in it so passionately, I made this video that possibly got me more hate than any other video I've ever made. Thanks for watching.